Hi, everybody. It's Amy Ostveen with Life Redesigned coming back at you with another podcast episode with Kim Trathen. And I'm so excited to be here today. We're so excited that we finally got to meet because there's been a lot of roadblocks for us being here. So we're super excited. We're going to talk so much today about how to grow through what you go through. And I'm super excited for Kim to share her story, where she's at, all that she's been through, just a little snippet of what she's been through. So Kim, welcome.
Thank you, Amy. I'm super excited to finally make this happen and talk with you. And I'm Kim Trathen. Any listeners can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn using at Kim the Business Coach. So as implied right there, I am a business coach. I help women become rich, happy, and confident, and we use their business as the tool to get them there. So I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs that are somewhere between under 200,000 in annual revenue is where most of my clients are when they come to me. Some are higher than that, some are lower. And we work a lot on both mindset and strategy to get women where they want to be in life. And I spent about 20 years in the actuarial field. I love to tell people I must have been like 10 when I started there, but I guess I was a smidge older than that. I was not a baby.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Quite honestly, I was miserable in corporate. And I had realized back in 2017, I had what literally felt like a whisper from God one night when I was laying in bed, dreading going into my 9-to-5 job the next day.
Yeah.
And it literally felt like a voice whispered to me, you need to be an entrepreneur. And my eyes burst open and I was like, oh, yes.
Did you ever think that before? Did you ever think that?
I just knew that I was very unhappy in corporate. For a little bit, I tried looking for another job and nothing was exciting to me. Nothing. And so during like my conscious waking times, I was just like, what am I going to do? Nothing. I applied for some things that I wasn't excited about and I didn't really want. And by that point in my life, I had transitioned I was head of marketing at the actuarial firm, which was slightly better, but it's still not super exciting to market retirement plans. Like I had no passion for it.
Yeah.
None. So no, before I had that night where I truly felt like God whispered to me, and it was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. I've always been a numbers person. My background was in statistics, which is why I ended up working in the actuarial field. I was a stats major and an econ minor when I was in college. The first thing, somebody has to do it, right?
Oh my gosh, seriously.
So the first thing I did then when I was like, okay, so what kind of business can I launch? Yeah. So I'm going to really nerd out here for a minute. I sat down and I made a Venn diagram, with the two circles that overlap. And I
love those. All right. I'm nerding with you. I actually love those. Those are legit.
They're super helpful.
They're legit. Yeah.
They're super helpful. So I had my passions on one side and my skills on the other side.
I love that.
And I was heavily involved in raising awareness for domestic violence. I had previously lost a friend who was murdered in an act of domestic violence back in 2010. And I had become connected with our local domestic violence shelter and I had run events for them and I worked a part-time temporary job there. So supporting women was my number one passion. Yeah. And my number one skill were my marketing skills. Because remember, I was head of marketing by this point. And I thought, it's a no-brainer. I'll just combine those. And I will help female business owners with their marketing. And so that's kind of where Kim Trathen coaching began, was really just leaning on my marketing skills that I had.
I love that. That's awesome. So do you focus on women with any kind of business, or is it a specific line of business that you focus on, or is it just whatever it is that they're doing?
Good question. I have worked with a lot of service-based female entrepreneurs, but I do work with product-based businesses as well. What I have learned over the last 4.5 years is that we all feel like our business problems are unique, but almost everybody has the same business problems. They think about pricing, they're worried about marketing, sales. It's just when you're looking at product side, then there's things like inventory and you have different overhead. but everybody has overhead in their business. Everybody's making investments. Everybody worries about meeting their bills. Everybody wonders how they're going to scale. Everybody worries about hiring employees when it's the first time they're hiring.
Yes.
So I do work. I'm not a coach that just coaches or anything like that. You just see a lot of those out there, but I work with all different types of businesses. And I really do focus on serving women just because that's where that passion really was. So that's why I really market to helping women. I've not had a male client yet. I wouldn't turn one down if he was dying to work with me, but my passion really is supporting women.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. I do love that about you because obviously, as you know, that's my heart. And I don't know, it's a really beautiful, beautiful world. And the hearts of women are just something so beautiful to me, as I know that's how you see them too. So we're just so unique in so many ways. And I love that.
Yes. And I love just empowering women in the way that society does not always, as a whole, value the things like intuition, for example.
Yeah.
Intuition is primarily, it's something that more women have than men. However, you talk to any high-powered CEO that just closed a deal, so many times they'll say, I just had a gut feeling. Men just word it differently. They don't sit and talk about their intuition. And by and large, women have a much stronger intuition than in general men do. But it's also been downplayed by society. Hiring managers aren't hiring women going, man, we should really tap into her intuition. Right? Nobody does that.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody does that. And so the skills that women bring to the table, especially inside of their businesses, learning how to trust ourselves more. So often society has just conditioned us to go to somebody else for the answers. Yep. Go to your dad, go to a teacher, go to a boss, go to a manager, go to a pastor, right? All of these different people that we are conditioned to think are people in positions of power. And we are trained from a very young age to go to them for the answers instead of trusting ourselves with what we think might be right for us. And a lot of that is leaning on our intuition. It's trusting that voice inside of us and not questioning it. Yeah. And so that's something that I love working on with my clients, because when you really learn to trust yourself, so much stress dissipates. It just releases from the body, because we just know when you trust yourself and you think, okay, I could do this, or I could do this. I could do option A, or I could do option B inside of my business or a different life decision. When you trust yourself, it doesn't mean that every single decision you make is going to end up in rainbows, glitter, butterflies, and money. But you know that no matter what decision you made the best decision with the information that you had at that time. And no matter what the outcome is, you trust yourself to navigate the next decision after that.
Yeah.
So it's not this like caving inward, the shame spiral of, oh no,
I make the wrong decision.
Yes.
I do the wrong thing. Oh my God, I should have chosen that thing. Yeah.
Yes, I shouldn't have launched a group, or I shouldn't have tried to charge so much for one-to-one, or I shouldn't have ordered so much inventory, or why did I sign up for that one event? Or God, why did I say that at that chamber meeting? I mean, just women are notorious for replaying things inside of our minds and then telling ourselves all the reasons why we did it wrong.
Yeah.
Instead of, right? Like, even if you had a conversation with somebody and it's like, man, I could have handled that better, right? Like, we own up for mistakes that are made, but being like, man, I could have handled that differently is so wildly different on our psyches and our bodies and our nervous systems and the stress that we carry than it is to be like, I screwed up. Why did I do that? I shouldn't have done that. See, I do this every time. I always say the wrong thing. Our minds love to live like this catastrophic thinking of things are either going to be like, oh, I'm either going to be wildly successful 5 minutes into this new venture, or I'm a complete failure.
Yeah.
Right? Like our brains are extremist. And I love a coach that I know and follow, Maggie Reyes. She's a marriage and relationship coach. And I love, she has been quoted as saying, brains are lying liars. The majority of thoughts that we have in our heads every single day are not true. They're just thoughts. And we get to choose what we think about situations, which brings back so much power into ourselves and power and control over how we're treating ourselves, how we're talking to ourselves, what we're doing inside of our businesses, how we're interacting with the world. And it's just really I think women are some of the most courageous beings. They've just, for decades and hundreds of years, been just conditioned to think otherwise about ourselves or about themselves.
Yeah. Mindset is it's so powerful. I talk about that with my staff, at Flirt. And so often it's like when they go through the certification process and the training process, like it feels like a lot of pressure. And then the pressure is, put onto them by self, because they're like, I want to make Amy proud and I want to make the brand proud. And I'm like, listen, we are human. You're going to go into that classroom and you're going to teach something wrong. You're going to fail. You're going to mess up. You're going to have a day where you're like, wow, that was not the best class I've ever done, because I still have those days and I've been doing this forever. So when you're teaching something and you go, I could have done that a little bit differently, start over while you're in the classroom in front of everybody and say, I think I could have done this differently. I think I could have taught you this differently. Let me try this one more time. So it's like just instilling those tiny pieces. And I have noticed, since my mindset has shifted to like creating a space that allows for like humans to be humans and failure to happen, instead of like, keeping everything on this like pedestal when I was holding onto so much control. It's like, I've noticed such a difference in the vibe and the community and the family of the business of like, okay, like it's real. It's very, very real. And people love that, like, I love that about you. You're so real on social media. That's what inspires me. And you're like, oh, I went to you were like at your son's game and you're like, the girl was like, oh, is there a cheerleading competition? I was dying when you posted that. And I was like, I love him. He's so great.
I was like, this is just still my vibe.
I know. I just
still my vibe.
I love it so much. Like, I just was loving that post. And I love how real you are. Your posts are like you doing a handstand against the wall and, focused on, it's so real. Like, it's so relatable. And I love that. But yeah, and I think, with
the other thing,
it's like just understanding, okay, sometimes we think like life always has to go one way, which it never does, as we all know. And okay, like, I think it's just creating a mindset of like, we just pivot, like, right. Well, like you said, you made this choice, you're confident in your intuition. Maybe it didn't go the way that you thought. So you go, okay, let me reevaluate. Let me slow down. Let me listen to my intuition again. I can pivot if I want to, I can change and I can redesign, and it's still going to be beautiful.
And it's still going to be beautiful. It can be messy and beautiful, right? It doesn't have to be. And if anybody's listening that isn't really into mindset, I just want everybody to know that when I first became a coach, I literally thought mindset was something for people that didn't understand strategy, because I came out of corporate. I came out of the world of, I was head of marketing, and we talk about ROI and all of the campaigns and what are your open rates and click rates and how do you write to get conversions and all of those things. So I remember laughing. I was like, oh God, mindset, please, people, all you need is a strategy. Like, that's literally what I thought.
An equation that equals.
Yes, just give me a formula and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then the more I started learning, the more I started seeing, then I got to the point where I was like, okay, people talk about being woo-woo. I'm one woo, not two. Like, I was like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Like, I'm one woo, not two.
Yeah.
And then I continued learning more. And what really blew my mind wide open is when I started realizing how much science there is behind mindset work.
Yes. Yeah.
And that, for me, being a former statistician coming out of corporate, like, seeing that there was science, this wasn't just something that people were saying that I didn't understand and I couldn't see with my eyes, right? Because that's what I used to think 5 years ago. That's totally what I thought. And instead I was like, oh, like, there's actual, if you start researching this, like, every single cell in your body vibrates at a certain frequency. It is measurable. And this is what people are actually talking about when they talk about being high vibe. It's not actually the catchphrase that I thought it was for a long time. We actually have control over the frequency that our cells are vibrating at. And that's what being high vibe actually means. I'm obsessed with it. It is heavy reading. It's called the Gateway Experience. It is you're familiar. So let's fill in the listeners if they're not. It is a CIA document that was unclassified. And they had a doctor come in and analyze all these different like hypnosis and I think tapping, EFT, like they analyzed all these different things. And then they came up with their process called the Gateway Experience, and they used it with their operatives. And they've been doing this since the 1980s. It is 100% mindset. You can listen to their tapes. It is about bringing your consciousness to a higher level of consciousness. They even explain in there why scientifically telepathy could exist. My brain almost melted when I was reading this document. I was like, wait, what? The government has been using mindset work since the 1980s?
Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah.
To me, absolutely wild. Even I would see people talk online about like ancestral trauma, saying that like trauma that your ancestors have endured can affect you today. And again, old Kim Trathen was like, what? That sounds crazy. I don't understand it, so it must not be true. And then I was like, oh, I started hearing about epigenetics. And I read about a study in epigenetics where they took, I don't know if you've heard of this, Amy, they took, I think it was field mice, and they had adult field mice in a cage. And every time they would pump the smell of cherry blossoms into the cage, they would shock their little feet. So they would get an electrical shock on their feet every time the smell of cherry blossoms came in. And then they would measure the response inside each mouse's body, right? Like they would have a physical response, right, to pain. Then they stopped shocking their feet and they would only pump the smell of cherry blossoms in. They would have the same physical response in their body as though they were being shocked, right? We have all encountered something like PTSD, right? We've all encountered something like this where we have a physical response, even though we're not in harm's way right now, but it triggers
like a smell, a sight.
Anything. And then what they did is they bred these adult mice and they studied the offspring. And what they found is that the offspring of these adult mice had more receptors in their brains to sense the smell of cherry blossoms. And those baby mice who had never been shocked would have a physical response to the smell of cherry blossoms because they had more receptors in their brain.
That's insane.
Blew me away. There's so much science behind mindset work. So it is so much about what we tell ourselves, right? Because what we think does turn out to usually be our reality. So like, I'm assuming it's mostly women on your staff, so I'll use the term she and girls, but maybe it's not all women. If she's thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't want to let Amy down. It's usually more like, oh no, I'm going to let Amy down. And then she feels pressure, probably stress, panic, fear, all of those negative emotions in her body. And what happens is we take action from what we're thinking and what we're feeling, and then we take actions. So her actions might look like constantly stressing about it, worrying about it, not sleeping well at night, not eating well, feeling sick to her stomach, right? Because fear, panic, stress, anxiety, it produces all of these things. She might also have memory problems. She's not now remembering how to do the moves or the routines, and the result she gets, not that you would be upset by it, but the result she gets is she's going to screw up, right? And everybody's going to screw up anyhow. But then when you're in that emotional state and you screw up, you are more likely to screw up, and you're going to create the result that you don't want because you're so focused and you're feeling so much anxiety.
Right.
And then when you think too about epigenetics, you could have somebody on your staff that had this ancestor that was treated horribly at work. Maybe they even died on the job. Maybe they were horribly abused, right? Because when you think about how employees were treated 100 years ago, I mean, it was bad. It was bad, right? And you could have somebody on staff that has more receptors in their brain to be highly alert in a work setting. And they don't even understand why they feel that way. And they know that you haven't done anything, but like they quote unquote can't help it. They may have been born with more receptors in their brain to feel highly anxious in those settings. It's wild. There's stories too of like concentration camp survivors and the types of anxiety that their grandchildren and great grandchildren had. One woman was having panic attacks just getting on a train. And what they said then when they were studying epigenetics is like, oh, it makes sense because her ancestor was loaded on a train where I think it was her great grandfather.
Yeah.
Right. Being brought to the concentration camp where he never saw his family again.
Yeah.
So it's no wonder that she was having panic attacks when you understand how epigenetics works.
Yeah.
Like, oh, there's so much that goes into this whole thing of mindset. It's so much more than just mantras. Right. Because that's what like so many people
or
think
like
of
thinking
as like
positive and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
So deep, so much deeper.
So much deeper than that. And it has such a massive impact on the results that we're creating in our lives and our businesses. Right. Like I'm a business coach. People hire me to help them in their businesses. But time and time again, my clients are saying like my whole life has improved because of this.
Yeah.
Because they have the tools and who we are. Right. We're not a different person. Most of us are not a different person just because we're in a work capacity than we are. We have the same fears. We have the same brain. We have the same traumas. We have the same emotional responses to things. So when you learn how to truly manage your mind and when you learn how to truly go after and create the results that you want, of course, it bleeds out into every single area of your business. So of course, your whole life becomes better once you have learned how to manage your mind and create the results that you want in one area. You start creating them in every area. So fun to see.
Absolutely. That's awesome. So I'm curious to know what this process and journey was like for you, like kind of going like I mean, obviously there was work, I'm sure, that you did figuring all this out and then diving into certain things. And what was that journey like for you? What was that process like for you?
My journey was not some mythical overnight success where I like had the message from God one night that I was meant to be an entrepreneur. And the next week I was fully booked running a 6-figure business. That did not happen. And it doesn't happen for the majority. I know. I was like, so God, I thought this was like going to be really fast and it wasn't. I was also working in corporate at the time. I worked 30 hours a week. I had 3 boys. They're all ADHD. They're all in multiple sports. Like so many women think it's hard to do something because they have a job. They don't have time. They have kids. I'm just here to say, again, it's a thought that you're having about your situation. My thought at that time was once I realized what I wanted to do, my thoughts included things like nothing's going to stop me. I'll figure it out. There's always 24 hours in a day. I'll do what I need to do right now. This season is temporary. I was at coffee shops on the weekends. My husband would stay home with the kids and do all the things. And I would go to a coffee shop and work uninterrupted. I did stay up late after the kids went to bed. I did get up early because at that point in time, plus I didn't have the mindset work supporting me because I thought it was all made up. Right. So I was like literally powering through, but I knew it was going to be temporary. And for me, what I realized one night is that for so many people, the fear of failure is what stops them. And I realized without a doubt, being so unhappy in corporate, my fear of regret far outweighed my fear of failure.
Yeah, sure.
I was not going to wake up another 10 years from now and think, what if I had done it? What if I had just tried? I was willing to try and fail than to just stay stuck in a life that I didn't love. The lather, rinse, repeat of like, get up at 4 a.m. to have time to work out, to get ready for work, get the kids to school, drive into work, sit in the office for 8 hours, leave, get home, walk in the door, do dinner, do homework, get them ready for bed, and then fall on the couch. I was sick of it. I did not want any more of it. So my journey may have taken longer than somebody who maybe just had the mindset work in the beginning or wasn't working a job with kids. My journey looked like, I think I hit 6 figures. See, I launched in 2018 and 2020 was my first 6-figure year in business. And
so amazing.
That December, I put in my notice. I did both my business and my corporate job.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Because that's what I had to do at that time. I wasn't willing to risk my home and our family's lifestyle to be like, I'm just going to quit and hope it works out. Like that's not my style at all. So I did both. And then I actually hit 6 figures while I was still in my corporate job. And then it was like, oh, if I can hit 6 figures when I'm in my corporate job, like, of course I can do that, not working all those hours in corporate. Like, this is just a no-brainer. for me
Yeah.
now. But that first year in business too, everybody's journey looks so different. I'm going to say, so I launched my business in March of 2018. And by launch, I mean my website went live and I had 0 paying clients. Okay.
Yeah.
That was what
Ready,
I was counting.
go.
Like,
Okay.
where are the clients? Where are they?
Yeah.
Right. So I launched in March of 2018. And I think I looked at my numbers a few months back. I made like $5,000 in 2018 as a coach.
Mm-hmm.
Some people would look at that and be like, why did you even continue? Like that year was a total failure. You made $5,000. That was it. But what you can't see by just looking at the financials is that with every new thing I did in my business that year, something really tragic, sad, or expensive happened in my personal life. So, and this so often happens to people. I launched my business, and that same month we had to put our family dog down. And then I signed my first client, and my dad was hospitalized. I launched a group program, and my father-in-law was hospitalized. Like every single thing that I did in my business had this like opposite pole of something going on. We had, I don't even remember now if it was $12,000 or $20,000 worth of home and car expenses. Our engine just blew on a car that we owed like $6,000 on. Our water heater flooded our finished basement twice. Our furnace went out. Like it was just never ending. Every single time we turned around, something was breaking, something was falling apart. And like it was all unexpected. So we had either $12,000 or $20,000 of home and car expenses. We had to put our dog down. My dad ended up hospitalized in June, and he had some health issues, but he was 74 and his body was aging, and he had a drinking problem his whole life, and that ages you faster. But when he was hospitalized, they said that he would be released a few days later because he had a bladder infection. Well, it ended up going septic. So the infection got into his bloodstream. It affected his brain. I watched him go clinically insane. Like he was hallucinating. He didn't know who we were. And he ended up surviving it. And for the listeners, I'm using air quotes. He ended up surviving it, but he was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And then he got released. He went in on June 8th. I think he got out on June 21. And I mean, he was mentally gone. He would have flashes of knowing my name and have flashes of having no idea who I was. He had lost so much weight. He literally looked like he had gotten out of like a concentration camp. I mean, he was so thin. He was still hallucinating, just out of it. He was wheelchair bound as a 2-person assist. And he went into the hospital on June 8th and he passed away on July 4th. So during that month, I had to take on power of attorney because he was emotionally and verbally abusive to my mom. So she helped me with every step of the process, but I was the one figuring out what his like no resuscitation things were. I was the one communicating with the doctors. I was the one seeking out a nursing home. I was the one spearheading all of the conversations to get him transferred from the hospital to the nursing home. Right. So like it was so much pressure and
so heavy. And you're
so
like in
heavy.
fight or flight like the whole time of just like
it was survival mode.
Your light switch has to be on 24/7 because you never know what's going to happen.
Yes. And I really wasn't doing anything in my business at that time. Like I was still working my job. I had the kids, right? Like that took every ounce of any energy I had. The only thing I kept doing during that time is I had mentioned this to you, Amy. I ran a show at that time, a live interview series called Girls Talk Business. And I decided that was my one reprieve, like for the week, where I got to like disconnect from all the things with the medical things and everything going on. I just got to disconnect from that.
Yeah.
And sit down with another woman who was in business and talk with her. So it was a bit of a refuge for me. And that is literally the only thing I did during that time. And so then he passed away on July 4th, and we had like the arrangements to make. And there was, I started therapy because there was all this trauma and all of that. And then in October, we were at my oldest son's football game, and my father-in-law was like, something just doesn't feel right in my chest. It's really weird. And he's the type of guy that never goes to the doctor. So long story short, they ended up leaving the football game. My mother-in-law drove him to an urgent care. They said, you need to get to the hospital right now. He walked himself into the hospital, He is a walking miracle today. It turned out part of his heart had ruptured in his chest. People normally die instantly. Like they don't even know, right? Like you just drop instantly because part of your heart just exploded and it's bleeding out into your body.
Yeah.
But he has really bizarre, unique heart anatomy. And so he was one of the first heart surgeries to be done in the United States back in the early 1950s. He was one of the first, he was written up in medical journals.
Oh, wow.
So because he had a heart, it's wild. So because he had a heart surgery back then, he had old scar tissue in his heart, and that's what encapsulated the blood when part of his heart exploded. So that scar tissue is what saved his life.
Oh my God.
But this was another long journey now. He was in ICU for weeks, right? He ended up having a heart surgery that was supposed to take 8 hours. And I don't even remember, it took like 12 or 14 hours. They didn't realize how crazy, like none of his heart stuff is where it's supposed to be. So for them to go in and try to repair anything, it took forever. We literally did not know if he was going to live or die at first. And I kept thinking, this can't be happening. My father-in-law cannot suddenly pass away after my dad just suddenly passed away 3 months ago. I just kept thinking, how on earth? So there was so much stress that first year of business. Fast forward to New Year's Eve of 2018, and my husband and I were like, thank God this year is ending. Like we are done. Everything that could happen has possibly happened. We're like, get out of here, 2018. We're done with you. 2019 is going to be the year.
Yeah.
Well, you know how they say don't count your chickens before they're hatched? Well, it was December 31 on 2018 when that afternoon I was like, God, I don't feel very good. Like this is so weird. And we ended up canceling our New Year's Eve plans. We were supposed to go to our cousin's house. I'm like, it's so weird. Like every time I stand up, I get really sick to my stomach feeling. But if I lay down, like I feel better. And I was launching something in my business. So I was like laying down on the couch, like building a landing page for this launch that I was doing. And I'm like building ads.
Yeah.
And I love to tease my husband about this because he was president of the Little League board at the time. And they had a big website launch that goes on that night. So he's working on that and he's kind of stressed. I keep laying down and he was finally like, do you think you could just walk the dogs? And I was like, okay, I'll walk the dogs. So I took our Huskies. I could not even make it around the block. I had to sit down multiple times because I thought I was going to throw up in somebody's yard. But every time I laid down, I felt fine. So I'm like, then I started thinking maybe I have like an inner ear thing going on because I know that can screw with your equilibrium.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was much, much worse. By about 5-ish that night, I realized something was dramatically wrong. And I was only home with my youngest, who at that time was 6. And my husband and the older boys were out getting like pizza and stuff when you were just going to stay in. And I won't go into too much detail. If anybody has a really weak stomach, just fast forward through this part of the podcast. But I don't want anybody to get like super woozy. So just fast forward like 30 seconds here. I ended up almost passing out in the bathroom. I fell back. I hit my head. I felt like my stomach was going to explode. I couldn't figure out what was happening. I started vomiting black. And when I looked at it, I thought, well, I ate a black bean taco today. So maybe that's the black bean taco. And I crawled on the floor out of our half bath and I was laying on the floor in front of our kitchen sink when my husband walked in the door that was right there. And he said something. I mean, we were probably 7 feet apart from each other. Like our house was not big. We were super close. And he said something. And that's when I realized I had lost my hearing. And it sounded like he was like a mile away from me yelling down a tunnel. Like I could hear that he was saying something and I started freaking out and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't hear. Oh my gosh, I can't hear. And then I was like, get the kids out of here, get them upstairs. And like my oldest had a friend that was over and he's like ushering, and all of a sudden my hearing came back. And I was like, oh, I'm going to get sick again. Like I am going to get sick. And so I made it upstairs. I made my husband get the kids out of the upstairs and I'm like, get them out of here. I'm going to get sick. I need a pan. I'm going to throw up. And I threw up in the pan and my husband ended up coming in the bathroom and I was laying on the floor and he said, you look gray. Like, do I need to take you to the ER? And I was like, no, I'm really sick. And he looked in the pan and he said, that's black. And I was like, I know, but I ate this black bean taco today. So I think it's the black bean taco. And he was kind of like, all of a sudden our kids started yelling, like, one of the dogs got a chicken bone because they had chicken wings. And so he's like,
It's just like
I'll be back.
all the things,
Like
all the things.
all the things.
Oh,
I ended up filling the toilet with more bright red blood than I knew was humanly possible with somebody not immediately dying. My in-laws came over, they stayed with the kids. We rushed to the ER. I had massive near fatal internal bleeding. So thank God I made it to the ER when I did. They couldn't figure out why. I ended up being hospitalized for 5 days. I had 3 blood transfusions, 2 iron infusions, and more tests than I can even count. They started checking me for cancer because they couldn't figure out why they couldn't get this internal bleeding to stop and why I kept crashing. Somebody my age shouldn't be having these. I was by far the youngest person on the gastro floor of the hospital. Let me tell you, everybody else was like 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Yeah.
And then there was me, who, let's see, I had just turned 40 earlier that year. I was by far the youngest person on that floor. 5 days later, I ended up getting released. I had put my whole launch on hold because I was supposed to be doing a launch that week.
Yeah.
I kept not feeling well. And I kept thinking, like, I know they said like it'll take a while for your energy to come back. Your hemoglobin is still really low. Oh no, it turned out, I mean, I was in there for 5 days. I had an IV in my arm the whole time. I had contracted an infection in my arm. I ended up in with my doctor. I had a sky high fever. My bicep was all red, starting to swell.
Are you
like,
serious?
It
right
would
now?
not end.
So this is into 2019, right? Like, so
Released January 4 of 2019 is when I got
beginning
released.
of the year that you were like, next year is going to be our year. This is how it
2019.
started.
Yes.
Here it is.
I was like, this is why we don't count our chickens before they're hatched. I thought, right, December 31 in the morning, I'm like, here we go, 2018 is. No, it was literally the year of hell that just kept going.
Oh my gosh.
Just kept going. It was insane. So again, when people look and they're like, wow, she only made $5,000 her first year in business. Oh no, let me tell you that I am so proud of that $5,000, that first $5,000.
Exactly.
That I made
so much
that
overcoming
year.
still. Yeah.
So much overcoming. And then there was the physical healing, and right, there was just so much. I actually had some PTSD from just the medical issue because I had a panic attack in the hospital. Like, it was a scene out of ER where they were like rushing in with machines, ripping my gown open, boobs exposed for everybody, hooking me up. And suddenly the male nurse leaned over and he goes, honey, have you ever had a panic attack? But I don't know, maybe one. It was like, I thought I was literally dying, but they were doing a blood transfusion. It was the second blood transfusion that they did. And so they monitor you very closely when you have a blood transfusion. For like the first, I don't remember if it's like 20 minutes or something, like a nurse is right in there with you to make sure you don't have a reaction. You have to basically sign your life away that they're putting somebody else's blood in your body.
Sure.
And what happened is they had the flow of blood going into my arm too fast. So what triggered my panic attack was I suddenly had this crazy sensation in my arm, and it went up my shoulder and nobody was in there to help me. And I literally, like, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. They'd already been checking me for cancer. Like, I was in tears thinking like, this is it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I am so proud of that $5,000 that I earned that first year of business. And I just want women everywhere to know that, like, really crappy things do happen and it's not fair and we can't control everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mindset work doesn't take away every single issue that you may have. Like, life is still 50-50. Good and bad things still happen, but stress is really terrible on the body, right? Mm-hmm. Stress can do horrible things to the body. Mm-hmm. And being able to leverage the mindset work, you manage your emotions in your body so much better when life hands you like the crappy 50% that comes.
Yeah.
It's not that one change is going to solve everything. It's not that your business hitting a certain level is going to take away all your problems. Right. So often women think, oh, if I just made XYZ dollars, then everything will feel better.
Yeah. Or if I just had this, or I was just in a relationship, or I just wasn't, or I just had this, or I just, Yeah.
Women do it with weight too, right? Like, if I just lost 10 pounds, I'd be happier.
Yeah.
And then it's 5 more. And then it's 5 more.
We're notorious for that. Oh, you have curly hair. I have straight hair. I wish I had curly hair. And if I had curly hair, you'd be like, oh, I wish I had straight hair. It's just, oh, you're tall. I'm sure. I was, we're so notorious for that.
We're so notorious for it. And I saw some quote somewhere. I don't know who to attribute it to. I have no idea who made this correlation or connection first, but I thought it was brilliant. It said that like one of the reasons beauty standards are pushed down women's throats, right? Like everywhere they tell us to be happy with ourselves, and then they sell us all the creams and all the beauty things and go get this fixed and do that surgery. And it said like women are some of the most powerful creatures on earth, but if they can get us preoccupied with things like our own looks, then we never tap into our full potential, right? Like it's a way of keeping us small. And you even think about shoving down women's throats, like the smaller your body is, the more valuable you'll be. And it's like they literally are telling women to shrink.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes me sick to my stomach to even think about.
I know. I wish I knew who to attribute that to. I cannot remember where I first heard that correlation. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
it's so true.
Yeah. So I was thinking of a quote when you were telling so much of your story in the first year of, it's one of my favorite quotes by Helen Keller, believe you can, and you're halfway there. And I think it's, I think sometimes we think, okay, I'm going to do mindset work, and then I'm going to do this. I'm going to do all these things. And then like you said, okay, then everything will turn around. But don't forget that that life still happens. You can pivot, and it doesn't have to be done right now. Like we put so much pressure on ourselves that when we do make a decision, okay, well, I made this decision, so everything needs to happen right now, but why? Like allowing everything to really line up, and just continuing to believe in yourself. Because I think sometimes when we do the work, or when we make a shift in life and then things happen, sometimes and like you said, it's kind of starting with that intuition, but we start to go, well, this just happened in my life, so maybe I shouldn't have started that business. Well, now this is happening. And I shouldn't have done that. Well, in my first year, I only made 5,000. So that probably means that life is telling me that I shouldn't be doing what it is that I'm doing. And I love that quote, because it's like, even though you only made $5,000 in your first year, you were still halfway there, because you still believe your intuition and your mindset and your heart was still believing that you could. And that extra, getting from that 5 to 6 figures was like, what we don't realize is that we're still halfway there, even though all this junk is still happening in life.
Yes. Oh, I remember a distinct moment laying in the hospital bed and thinking like, is this a sign from God that I'm not on the right path? Like I was just like thinking about this. And I remember laying there, and suddenly my phone went ding. And I wasn't looking at my phone a lot, but in that moment I looked, and I had just sold an e-course laying from the hospital bed. And I was like, no, that's my sign. That's my sign that I can make money no matter what's happening in my life right now. That's the type of safety net that I get to choose to create for myself. And then my husband came in the room a little bit later on, and I was still like thinking, like all these thoughts were circulating through my mind. And he came in the room and he said, I'm trying to remember his exact words. He said, I think we need to talk about some things and figure out if this is really working. And I was devastated. I thought he's going to tell me not to do this business. But I thought, I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I did more mindset work back there than I ever realized. By the way, I just didn't know that's what mindset work. But when I look back at my old journals, I'm like, oh man, I was good. I was good before I knew what mindset was. And I thought, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions though. And so like almost choking back tears, I was like, what do you mean? And he said, I just don't think we should be in the high deductible HSA. I really think we should do the other insurance plan. I died.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Right. But what a great example of how my mind could have been like, I don't know what you're talking, right? Like I could have freaked out or carried so much shame. And here he's like, I think we need to be in the other insurance plan. I don't think the high deductible HSA is a great option.
That's what I was thinking too, honey. That's exactly
totally.
I was with you. I was
exactly what I thought you were going to say. I never thought otherwise.
Oh my gosh. We are so like that as women. We are so it's like, you just wish you could turn it off, but we're just those beings of just like, our mind just always goes there, Well, I even think about, like, even like just thinking about labor. I was just talking with my son about this, and my mom and I were having a discussion about how powerful women are and how we're just like, we have all these amazing qualities. And I said to him, he was like, "Oh, well, me and dad are so cool. And me and dad are this and me and dad are," and I was like, "Have you ever given childbirth?" To my 11-year-old. This is me like proving my point to my 11-year-old. And it's like, and then my mom and I started talking about it, and I'm just like, when you go through childbirth, however it is that you go through it, it doesn't matter if it's natural, C-section, epidural. I'm like, carrying a baby and bringing a human into this world is like, you can do anything. And that is like, I mean, the mindset of getting a child out of you, it's like,
just the sheer fact that we can grow a human in us. I mean,
yeah. It's like, you sit there for a second, and it's like, I just grew this human, then I just delivered her in 7.5 hours. Okay, I can do anything. Literally, I can do anything. And so sometimes we forget that side. We forget that side of the power of all, like the power of what we are created to do and what we can and what we're able, because we get so, and I think one thing, that I know you talk about too, is slowing down to be able to pay attention. It's like, because as women, we have to do we do a lot, we do so much. We're doing this and we're on this and we're this, like, there's a lot that calls for us, especially with our hearts and multitasking and all of that. But it's really taking the time to be able to slow, whatever that means for you in your life, so that
it could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 minutes during the day where you just and just take it down a notch and just be with yourself and be with your thoughts and watch what they are. Something that I love to share with women, because our minds do, quote unquote, go there quite often, right? Like, I was sure my husband was going to tell me that I shouldn't do my business. And what I love to tell women is just grab a sheet of paper and write down the thoughts. Usually we have more than one, and ask yourself, is that fact or fiction? And what I mean by that is, if it's fact, it is provable in a court of law. So thinking something like, I'm a failure. Sorry, not provable in a court of law. That is not a fact. There are things making you feel like you're a failure, but it is not provable in a court of law. What I hear from a lot of business owners is some version of, I'm broke. Not provable in the court of law. You could have $5 in your checking account right now, and somebody else who's negative $1,000 is going to be like, what do you mean you're broke? Your account's still positive. You could have $100,000 in your bank account, and one person's going to feel broke and one person's going to feel like they are the richest ever. Right? So what is actually fact is what's provable in a court of law. So if you have thoughts going through your head, like, I'm broke, I'm scraping by. That's one that I heard from one of my clients recently. I'm scraping by. And I said, remember, that's a thought you're having, and you get to choose what your thoughts are. Right? I'm scraping by is not provable in the court of law. Somebody else is going to look at what you've built and what you have, and they're going to be like, wow. That's amazing.
I love that. I'm like thinking about even kids, like how we teach our kids to grow up that way too. Like, I feel like when my son, I feel that he's getting ungrateful, I make him sit down and write a list of things that he's thankful for, because just doing that, we could not even talk about it. His attitude changes. And I do that when I say, because I still have thoughts like that, or maybe I'm not good enough to do X, maybe I'm not good enough to do that. Should I be, of course. And it's weighing that. And then I'll sit down and write everything I'm thankful for. And it's like, okay. Okay. That just,
like, there's a lot here.
There's a lot here, because somebody that doesn't have what's on my paper, if they had this, would be like, wow, you are so blessed. So it is just
my
that
kids too. And so what happens too, I also love to geek out on neuroscience. Again, this is where like science meets mindset, right? It's so fun. So what happens inside of the brain is that we have all of these neural pathways that are inside of our brain. So like when we talk about epigenetics, we might have a neural pathway that, right, it makes us anxious to ride trains, like that gal whose great grandfather was in a concentration camp. But when every single time we think a thought, it builds a neural pathway in our brain. This is why changing your mind and changing your mindset can feel physically painful, because when you start changing your thoughts, let's say you've been told your whole life that you're not going to amount to anything, right? You'll never be successful. Maybe you had parents that were telling you that. That is now in your head, literally. It's a thought that you think, like, I'm never successful. They said I'd be a failure and I am. I never get what I want. I never do it right. I never do enough. Those are really strong. I think of them as like highways in the brain, very strong neural pathways that are built. So when you start trying to change the way you think, and maybe instead of thinking, I'm always a failure, I fail at everything, maybe you're just the only thought that you can believe right now is, I'm trying new things.
Yeah.
Right. I believed in myself for 5 minutes yesterday, and that was great for me. Right.
I'm doing my best and it's perfect.
I'm doing my best and it's perfect. But those thoughts are like teeny tiny, like a little deer trail through the woods, because it's not a strong formed thought yet. That's why our brains default back to the strongest neural pathways. And then as you're forming new neural pathways, those old ones have to die. And that is why they scream so loud inside your head when those old neural pathways are dying, because those neural pathways are literally shrinking in your brain. And those really well-established ones take longer to shrink, and they scream the loudest inside of our heads when they're dying. That's why so many people revert back to old behaviors. And it can feel physically like, gosh, my head just feels exhausted. Like my brain feels like I've worked so
tiring,
hard.
like actually
tiring.
Draining.
There is physiological changes happening in your brain when you change your mindset.
Absolutely. What do you feel like it was for you to go through, when you share that story of your first year? I mean, everybody has obstacles that they overcome, and maybe everybody goes through some different ways of how they get out of that. But what's your encouragement? I think to women specifically, I know we've talked a lot about mindset, but what were your like nuggets that you kept in your pockets that were like, okay, these are maybe the couple strong things that really get me through, that kind of broke that barrier for you to continue to move forward?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me was just recognizing, I guess I can be a bit of a stubborn person. And I literally was like, this is not going to fail because I didn't try hard enough. I wasn't willing to give up. But I was so miserable and felt so stuck in that 9-to-5 corporate life. Like giving up literally was not an option.
Wasn't an option.
Yeah. It was never like, gosh, do I keep going or no? There was one time when I had a failed launch early in my journey, and I had run ads and I like barely broke even. And I felt really defeated over that after the prior launch had been a really big one. So I also want to normalize, just because you make money once doing something doesn't mean it just always rolls in like that. But there was one time I remember I felt really defeated and I was like, maybe I'm not meant to do this. And my husband was like, you shut your mouth right now. That is not the Kim Trathen I know. You love this. You are meant to support women. You are meant to do this. And I was like, yeah, you're right.
I love that.
And he just gave me like the tough love pep talk, and he does not talk like that. So it was so funny.
That is funny.
But he gave me the tough love pep talk, and I was like, yeah, you're right. But other than that, giving up was never an option for me. It was like, I will just keep learning and growing. I always invested with a mentor. I was not willing to be one of those people that sat around and Googled it for 4 years and then was like, I don't know, it didn't work. Right? Like that. I was like, no, I am here to make this a success. I am here to learn as much as I can. The first investment I made, I didn't sign up for a website. I didn't do brand. The first investment I made was into a program that gave me all of the steps to launch my business. So I think it was a combination of being willing to invest in myself, willing to trust myself, and just sheer stubbornness that this wasn't going to fail because I gave up, no matter what I had to do, quote unquote, right now during those starting years.
Sure. And one final question for you, because I feel like this is something that as women, you know, being vulnerable can be an interesting path for us sometimes because we, you know, a lot of us have a lot of different masks that we put on, whether it's in front of family or this is my event mask and this is my school mask and this is my church mask and this is my mask, you know. But for you, what's your advice to women as they go through, you know, overcoming hardship, wondering what to do? Like, what's your number one advice of just being real? Because like I said before, that's something I just love about you, and you share it. You share you so well in the public eye. Like, it just feels like we know you. You know what I mean? So what's for women that are like, I just don't have anything to share. I don't have a story, or my story is too scary, or I'm too scared to do that. What's your biggest go-to and nugget for that to tell them, like,
I think my
story?
I have a couple things coming to mind. First and foremost, everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Everybody does. Even if your story is a story that includes, like, my parents were the greatest, they were happily married, we never had any trouble, right? Like, but everybody has a story, and everybody can have a trauma response to different things. Trauma doesn't have to be, right, like abuse, like there's all different types. So everybody has a story, everybody has conquered things, and your story is just as important as somebody else's. Now, one of the things that I see a lot, especially with earlier stage entrepreneurs, but it's this fear of like, but if they know XYZ, like, I have to look professional, or I have to sound like XYZ, right? And like this.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, if you think about it, a lot of it just comes from the societal norms that we've been conditioned to think that successful people are in corporate. And there's like this huge new wave of business at this stage, especially in the online space. People want to know who they're working with. People want to know the person behind the business.
Yes.
And something that can take work to embrace. My coach says it to us all the time, like, your flaws, and I'm using air quotes for the people in the podcast, your flaws are your features, meaning anything that you actually feel insecure about are the things that make you an individual. I used to worry so much that I laughed too much, I talked too loud, and I was too goofy.
Oh my God.
I was told all of those things in corporate. All of those things I was told. Right. But like, now I have clients that hire me and they're like, I need to learn how to have more fun in my business. I need to learn how to not take myself so seriously.
That's what attracts everyone to you. You're so vibrant. Yeah.
But corporate America did not embrace that. Shocking. I know. Right. So whatever things you feel insecure about, you likely feel insecure about it because somebody made you feel that way when you were younger. And I don't know, it's like, those are the things that just make you an individual. Those are the things that make you unique. Right. I don't care how many tattoos we have and piercings. And I mean, you should have seen the looks of some of my coworkers back when I was in corporate and I came in with pink stripes in my hair. I thought this one guy was literally going to have a coronary at his desk. Right. My vibrancy made him very uncomfortable.
Oh my gosh. I remember at a sales job that I worked at, we were only allowed to wear certain colors: navy, black, and gray. And I would walk in with, I would have a gray suit, but I would have like a hot pink collared shirt. And it was the same thing. Everyone was like, hey, you're not supposed to wear that color. And I was like, yeah, I'm wearing it because I'm not wearing gray and navy and like black. And then I would just come in with all these, like, my suit would be that color, but I would come in with all these like hot colors underneath, and everyone was like, Rebel, what are you doing? And I was like, I can't live like that. I mean, I just broke the rule. I just did, because I was like, I can't do it. And I was like, top sales rep. So they were like, I was like, do you want me to wear gray and not be happy? Or do you want me to wear hot pink and go sell a lot?
And like bring in business.
Yeah. So they were like, but yeah, it was just funny. I never followed that rule ever. So I feel you on that.
Yeah. So I want women to know too, that there are ridiculous people that will troll you online. Just block and delete as fast as you can. They don't deserve any of your energy. They can go in somebody else's world. I'm not for everybody. You're not for everybody, Amy. Our listeners are not for everybody.
Right.
And they don't deserve any of your time or energy. And I don't care if it's people in your family that you know, if they are not respectful to you online, block and delete. I have removed family members from my Facebook account that I felt like were argumentative. And I was like, that's not what I'm here for.
Yep.
Nobody automatically deserves to have your attention just because you may even know them in real life. Block and
Yeah.
delete.
And don't be afraid to be authentic,
Yeah.
own all of that of you. I love that.
People will separate real fast into two camps, the camps that love and support you and the camps that don't. And so you just get to build your community of people that love and support you no matter what you're doing in life or business.
Absolutely. This is such a small piece of you and your story and all the things that you are amazing at and that you do. So listeners, make sure to follow, make sure to go find her. I'm so excited for you. I love everything about you. I love where you came from, how you got here, like where you're at right now. I just love all the things that you're doing. So thanks for being you so that you inspire all of us to be us. We just really appreciate that women leadership in you.
Thank you so much. It's been just a joy to hang out with you finally.
I know.
And chat with your listeners. And this has been amazing. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, thanks so much for joining us on Life Redesigned for another episode of Growing Through What You Go Through. We love you all so much and we'll talk to you soon.